Mechanic helps Mohamed Salah without knowing who he was, and his life changes forever. The scorching Los Angeles sun beat down mercilessly on Mendez Motors, a small auto repair shop tucked away in a bustling corner of the city. Inside, Carlos Mendez, a 38-year-old mechanic with grease-stained hands and a furrowed brow, wiped sweat from his forehead as he battled with a particularly stubborn engine. The whirring of tools and the clanking of metal filled the air, barely masking the worry that had taken residence in Carlos's mind. As he worked, his eyes darted to the stack of unpaid bills on his cluttered desk. The shop, a legacy from his father, had been struggling lately. Fewer customers meant tighter budgets, and Carlos found himself working longer hours just to keep the lights on. He loved his work, but the stress was taking its toll. Just as Carlos was about to call it a day, the sound of a high-performance engine caught his attention. A sleek black sports car pulled up to the front of his shop, its engine purring like a contented cat. Carlos straightened up, curiosity piqued by the unexpected arrival. A man stepped out of the car, his face partially obscured by a baseball cap and sunglasses. Despite the casual attire, there was something about his demeanor that suggested he wasn't just an average Joe. The stranger looked around, seeming a bit lost and definitely frustrated. "Can I help you?" Carlos called out, wiping his hands on a rag as he approached the newcomer. The man turned, revealing a neatly trimmed beard and a friendly, if somewhat anxious, smile. "Yes, please," he replied, his accent distinctly Middle Eastern. "I'm having some trouble with my car. It's making a strange noise." Carlos nodded, all business now. "I'm Carlos Mendez. Let's take a look, shall we?" He gestured for the man to pop the hood. As they stood over the engine, the stranger introduced himself simply as Mo. Carlos, focused on the task at hand, barely registered the name. He was too busy listening to the engine, his experienced ears picking up the slightest irregularities. "Sounds like it could be a problem with the timing belt," Carlos mused, reaching in to check a few components. "Have you noticed any loss of power or unusual vibrations?" Mo nodded, looking relieved that someone seemed to understand the issue. "Yes, especially when accelerating. I was worried I wouldn't make it to my destination." As Carlos worked, Mo's phone rang. The mechanic paid little attention to the conversation, catching only snippets about training schedules and team meetings. He assumed Mo was some kind of businessman, or maybe a coach. After about an hour of diagnostics and repairs, Carlos stepped back, a satisfied smile on his face. "That should do it. I've adjusted the timing and replaced a worn belt. She should run smoothly now." Mo's face lit up with relief and gratitude. "Thank you so much. You have no idea how important this is. How much do I owe you?" Carlos waved his hand dismissively. "Don't worry about it. Consider it a welcome to LA gift." Mo looked taken aback. "Are you sure? I can't just take your time and expertise for free." Carlos shrugged, a hint of pride in his voice. "Sometimes helping someone out is payment enough. Besides, it's not every day I get to work on a car like this." As Mo prepared to leave, Carlos couldn't help but notice a familiarity about him, but he couldn't quite place it. He shook it off, chalking it up to a long day and an overactive imagination. Little did Carlos know that this simple act of kindness would set in motion a series of events that would change his life forever. As he watched the black sports car drive away, he had no idea that he had just helped one of the most famous soccer players in the world, or that his small gesture would soon make him the talk of the town. Carlos locked up the shop, his mind already on tomorrow's workload, blissfully unaware that his world was about to be turned upside down. The sunset painted the sky in vibrant oranges and pinks, a fitting end to a day that would mark the beginning of an extraordinary journey for the humble mechanic from Los Angeles. The next morning dawned bright and early, finding Carlos already elbow-deep in an oil change. The TV in the corner of his shop hummed quietly, providing background noise as he worked. Suddenly, a familiar name caught his attention. "And in sports, news, soccer superstar Mohamed Salah has arrived in Los Angeles for a series of charity events and friendly matches," the news anchor announced. Carlos glanced up, a wrench pausing midair. "Huh. Imagine running into someone like that," he mused to himself, before returning his focus to the task at hand. As the day wore on, Carlos found his mind drifting back to the mysterious Mo from the previous evening. There was something about him that Carlos couldn't quite shake. The way he carried himself, the expensive car, the phone call about training schedules. A nagging suspicion began to form in the back of his mind. Just then, the bell above the shop door chimed. Carlos looked up to see a delivery man holding a large envelope. "Delivery for Carlos Mendez," the man announced. Puzzled, Carlos signed for the package and tore it open. Inside was a handwritten note and a check that made his eyes widen in disbelief. The note read, "Dear Carlos, your kindness and generosity yesterday meant more than you could know. Please accept this as a token of my gratitude. The world needs more people like you. Sincerely, Mohamed Salah." Carlos felt the wrench slip from his fingers, clattering to the floor. His suspicion had been right. The mysterious Mo was none other than Mohamed Salah himself. The realization hit him like a ton of bricks. In a daze, Carlos stumbled to his computer and pulled up news articles from the previous day. There it was. Photos of Salah arriving in LA, wearing the same cap and sunglasses as the man who had come into his shop. How had he not recognized one of the most famous soccer players in the world? As if on cue, his phone began to buzz incessantly. Messages from friends and family flooded in, all asking variations of the same question. Did you really help Mohamed Salah? Carlos sat down heavily in his chair, trying to process the surreal turn of events. He had always prided himself on treating every customer with respect and kindness, regardless of who they were. But he never imagined that this approach would lead to helping a global superstar. The rest of the day passed in a blur. News vans began to appear outside the shop, reporters eager to get the scoop on the mechanic who had unknowingly assisted Mohamed Salah. Carlos, overwhelmed by the sudden attention, retreated to the back of his shop, trying to make sense of it all. As evening fell, Carlos finally worked up the courage to look at his phone again. Among the sea of notifications, one message stood out. It was from an unknown number, but the content made his heart race. "Mr. Mendez, this is Samir from Mohamed Salah's team. Mr. Salah would like to meet with you tomorrow to thank you in person. Are you available?" Carlos read and reread the message, his mind spinning. He had always been a behind-the-scenes kind of guy, content with his simple life as a mechanic. Now, he was thrust into the spotlight, about to meet one of the biggest names in sports. As he locked up the shop that night, Carlos couldn't help but feel a mix of excitement and trepidation. His life had changed in ways he could never have imagined, all because of one act of kindness. He looked up at the starry Los Angeles sky, wondering what tomorrow would bring. Little did Carlos know, this was just the beginning. His encounter with Salah was about to open doors he never knew existed, leading him down a path that would not only change his life, but also impact his community in ways he could never have dreamed. The following morning, Carlos woke to the sound of his phone buzzing incessantly. Bleary-eyed, he reached for it, only to be bombarded by a flood of notifications. His social media accounts, usually quiet save for the occasional family photo or car repair tip, were now overflowing with messages, comments, and friend requests. As he scrolled through the sea of notifications, the reality of his situation began to sink in. The story of the humble mechanic who had helped Mohamed Salah had gone viral overnight. His name was trending on Twitter, and his Instagram followers had skyrocketed from a modest few hundred to over 50,000. Carlos rubbed his eyes, trying to make sense of it all. He had always been a private person, content with his simple life and the satisfaction of a job well done. Now, he found himself thrust into a spotlight he never asked for or wanted. Reluctantly, he got out of bed and prepared for what he knew would be an unusual day. As he approached his shop, he could see a crowd gathered outside. Journalists with microphones and cameras stood at the ready, while curious onlookers craned their necks, hoping to catch a glimpse of the now famous mechanic. Taking a deep breath, Carlos stepped out of his car. Immediately, he was swarmed by reporters, their questions coming at him rapid fire. "Mr. Mendez, how did it feel to help Mohamed Salah? Did you recognize him right away? What did you talk about? Are you a soccer fan?" Overwhelmed, Carlos raised his hands, trying to calm the crowd. "Please," he said, his voice barely audible over the commotion. "I'm just a mechanic. I was doing my job, that's all." He managed to push his way through the crowd and into his shop, locking the door behind him. Inside, he leaned against the wall, his heart pounding. This was not the life he was used to, not the life he had ever wanted. As the day wore on, Carlos tried to focus on his work, but it was nearly impossible with the constant ringing of his phone and the crowd outside. Regular customers struggled to get through, and Carlos found himself apologizing profusely for the inconvenience. By mid-afternoon, exhaustion and frustration had set in. Carlos sat at his desk, head in his hands, when his sister Anna burst through the back door. "Carlos!" she exclaimed, her eyes wide with excitement. "Have you seen the news? You're famous!" Carlos looked up, a wry smile on his face. "Trust me, Anna. I've noticed." Anna's excitement faltered as she took in her brother's demeanor. "Are you okay? This is amazing, isn't it?" Carlos sighed, struggling to put his feelings into words. "I don't know, Anna. I'm a mechanic, not a celebrity. I don't know how to handle all this attention. I just want to do my job and live my life." Anna sat down next to him, placing a comforting hand on his shoulder. "I understand, but think about it this way. You did something kind, without expecting anything in return. That's resonating with people. You're inspiring others to be better." As Carlos pondered her words, his phone buzzed again. This time, it was a direct message on Instagram from none other than Mohamed Salah himself. The message was simple, but it made Carlos's heart skip a beat. "Thank you again for your help and kindness. Your humility and generosity are truly inspiring. I'd like to meet with you tomorrow if possible. There's something I'd like to discuss." Carlos stared at the message, a mix of emotions swirling inside him. Part of him wanted to decline, to retreat from this unexpected spotlight. But another part, the part that had always dreamed of making a difference, urged him to accept. With trembling fingers, he typed out a reply. "Thank you, Mr. Salah. I would be honored to meet with you." As he hit send, Carlos couldn't shake the feeling that his life was about to change even more dramatically. He looked around his small shop, at the tools he'd used for years, at the faded photos of his father who had taught him everything he knew about cars and about life. Whatever was coming, Carlos knew one thing for certain. He would face it with the same integrity and kindness that had gotten him this far. As the sun set on another extraordinary day, Carlos Mendez, the mechanic, who had unknowingly helped a soccer superstar, prepared himself for whatever tomorrow might bring. The next morning, Carlos arrived at his shop earlier than usual, his nerves on edge. He had barely slept, his mind racing with thoughts of the impending meeting with Mohamed Salah. As he unlocked the door, he noticed the crowd of reporters had thinned, but a few persistent souls remained, cameras at the ready. Inside, Carlos busied himself with routine tasks, trying to calm his nerves. He checked and double-checked his appearance in the small mirror hanging in the office, making sure there were no grease stains on his cleanest work shirt. At precisely 10 a.m., a sleek black SUV pulled up outside. The remaining reporters sprang to life, cameras flashing as Mohamed Salah stepped out, accompanied by a man Carlos assumed was his manager. Salah, dressed casually in jeans and a t-shirt, waved politely to the cameras before making his way to the shop. Carlos took a deep breath and opened the door, trying to appear calmer than he felt. "Mr. Salah," Carlos greeted, extending his hand. "It's an honor to meet you." Again. Salah's face broke into a warm smile as he shook Carlos's hand. "Please, call me Mo. And the honor is all mine, Mr. Mendez. Your kindness that day meant more than you know." As they stepped inside, away from the prying eyes of the media, Salah's demeanor relaxed even further. He looked around the shop with genuine interest, asking Carlos about various tools and machines. "This is where the magic happens, huh?" Salah said, his eyes twinkling. Carlos couldn't help but chuckle. "I don't know about magic, but we do our best to keep people on the road." As they settled into the small office, Salah's expression turned more serious. "Mr. Mendez, Carlos. I wanted to meet with you today because your actions really touched me. In a world where everyone knows who I am, where people often want something from me, you treated me like any other person who needed help. That kind of genuine kindness is rare." Carlos felt his cheeks flush with embarrassment. "I was just doing my job, Mr. Sal. I mean, Mo. It's how my father taught me to treat every customer." Salah nodded appreciatively. "And that's exactly why I'm here. Your story has inspired a lot of people, Carlos. It's reminded them of the importance of kindness and integrity. I want to help you expand on that." Carlos listened, a mix of confusion and curiosity on his face, as Salah outlined his proposal. The soccer star wanted to invest in Mendez Motors, to help Carlos expand his business and create a training program for underprivileged youth in the community. "We could set up a scholarship program," Salah explained, his eyes alight with enthusiasm. "Teach them not just about car repair, but about the values of hard work, integrity, and kindness that you embody." Carlos sat back, stunned. This was far beyond anything he had ever imagined for his small shop. I don't know what to say," he stammered. "It's an incredible offer, but why me?" Salah leaned forward, his gaze intense. "Because, Carlos, the world needs more people like you. People who do the right thing not for recognition or reward, but because it's the right thing to do. I have the resources to make this happen, but you have the heart and the skills to make it work." As the reality of the offer sank in, Carlos felt a mix of excitement and trepidation. This could change everything, not just for him, but for so many young people in his community. It was an opportunity to create something truly meaningful, to pass on the values his father had instilled in him. "I'd be honored," Carlos finally said, his voice thick with emotion. "But I have one condition." Salah raised an eyebrow, intrigued. "What's that?" "We named the training program after my father," Carlos said. "He's the one who taught me everything I know, about cars and about life." Salah's face broke into a wide grin. "I think that's a wonderful idea, Carlos. To honoring those who taught us and passing it on to the next generation. That's what this is all about." As they shook hands to seal the deal, Carlos felt a sense of purpose he had never experienced before. His life had changed in ways he could never have imagined, all because of one simple act of kindness. As Salah prepared to leave, Carlos caught a glimpse of the crowd outside. The flashing cameras, the excited faces. For the first time since this whirlwind began, he didn't feel overwhelmed. Instead, he felt a surge of hope and determination. He realized that this was just the beginning of a new chapter, not only for himself, but for many others who would benefit from the opportunities he was about to create. The scorching Los Angeles sun beat down on the newly renovated Mendez Motors, its gleaming facade a testament to the extraordinary turn of events in Carlos Mendez's life. The once struggling mechanic shop now stood as a beacon of hope and opportunity in the community, all thanks to a chance encounter with soccer legend Mohamed Salah. Carlos wiped the sweat from his brow as he surveyed the bustling workshop. The rhythmic sounds of tools and machinery filled the air, accompanied by the excited chatter of young apprentices. It had been 6 months since Salah's generous investment, and the transformation was nothing short of miraculous. With the influx of funds, Carlos had not only upgraded his equipment, but also expanded the workshop's capacity. State-of-the-art diagnostic tools lined the walls, and several new lifts allowed for multiple vehicles to be serviced simultaneously. But the most significant change wasn't in the machinery. It was in the people. The workshop now employed a team of skilled mechanics, many of whom Carlos had personally trained. Among them were faces from the local community, individuals who might never have had the opportunity to pursue a career in automotive repair without the center's support. Adjacent to the main workshop stood the crown jewel of Carlos's vision, the Youth Training Center. It was here that Carlos felt his true calling had been realized. Every day, young men and women from underprivileged backgrounds filtered through its doors, eager to learn and build a future for themselves. As Carlos walked through the center, he couldn't help but feel a sense of pride. The walls were adorned with motivational posters and technical diagrams. In one corner, a group of students huddled around an engine, their instructor patiently explaining its intricacies. In another, a young woman confidently operated a computerized diagnostic system, her face lit up with understanding. "Mr. Mendez!" a voice called out. Carlos turned to see Miguel, one of his first students, approaching with a broad smile. "I just wanted to thank you again. I've been offered a full-time position at the dealership. Carlos's heart swelled with joy. That's fantastic news, Miguel. You've earned it with your hard work and dedication. As Miguel hurried off to share the news with his classmates, Carlos reflected on the ripple effect of kindness. What had started as a simple act of helping a stranger had blossomed into something far greater than he could have imagined. The sound of a familiar voice drew Carlos's attention to the entrance. There, surrounded by a small entourage, stood Mohamed Salah himself. The soccer star had kept his promise to stay in touch, occasionally dropping by to check on the center's progress. "Carlos, my friend," Salah greeted warmly, embracing the mechanic. "This place looks more impressive every time I visit." As they toured the facility, Salah's eyes sparkled with approval. "You've done amazing things here, Carlos. This is exactly what I hoped would happen when I made that investment." Carlos nodded humbly. "None of this would have been possible without your generosity, Mo. You've changed not just my life, but the lives of everyone who comes through these doors." They paused to watch a group of students working on a complex engine repair. Salah turned to Carlos, his expression serious. "You know, when I first came to your shop that day, I was having doubts about my move to the States. But seeing what you've accomplished here, how you've used this opportunity to lift up your community, it reminds me why I love this country. It's the land of opportunity, where dreams can become reality." Carlos felt a lump in his throat. "I never imagined my life could change so drastically. But now I wake up every day with a sense of purpose. These kids, they're the future. And we're giving them the tools to build it." As the day wound down, Carlos stood outside the center, watching as students and staff filed out, their faces filled with hope and determination. He thought about the journey that had brought him here, from a struggling mechanic to a mentor and community leader. The friendship between Carlos and Salah had deepened over time, transcending their initial roles of mechanic and customer. They had found in each other a shared passion for making a difference, for using their respective platforms to create positive change. As the sun set over Los Angeles, casting a warm glow on Mendez Motors and the Youth Training Center, Carlos felt a profound sense of gratitude. His life had indeed changed forever, but more importantly, he had become an agent of change for others. In the end, it wasn't just about fixing cars, it was about fixing lives, one opportunity at a time. The legacy of that fateful day when a humble mechanic helped a soccer star would continue to ripple through the community for years to come, a testament to the power of kindness, generosity, and the indomitable human spirit.